Let's move to our next story here. Of course, we are discussing, well, the classic, if you like, net zero. Ed Miliband, all guns blazing in his race for net zero, but costing an eye-watering 40 billion quid a year, we understand. Is that worth the risk? Why the urgency as well? The ambitious strategy to boost offshore wind capacity, triple solar power generation and overhaul the national grid will be touted as a way to lower consumer bills. Let's have a little listen to the Energy Secretary.
This was based on independent modelling, which is what we used in the election, that said that bills would be up to £300 lower in a clean power system. And what I was going to say, Naga, and this is really, really important, is we now have the National Energy System Operator, the independent body that has looked at these plans and says it's achievable, which is really important. It gives us energy security, it will lower the cost of electricity, and it can lead to lower bills.
It can lead to lower bills, up to 300 quid, not instantly. Unions warning this could be horrific for jobs, and economists suggesting it could be terrible for bill payers. But that is the target. To meet that target to 2030, experts have warned that it's going to be an expensive task in lots of different ways. Let's get a couple of different voices on this. Donnachadh McCarthy, Director at Climate Media Coalition, and Rupert Darwall, author of Green Tyranny. Welcome to you both. I mean, Donnachadh, first of all, we've spoken a lot over the years on this issue and all the associated tentacles of the environmental arguments. Why the urgent? Why 2030? Why don't we do a bit of China and go, what about 2060? We'll still do it, we just won't rush to it.
Well, China is actually investing billions in the green transition. China has invested, I think, over half of the global investments in solar and wind have been invested by China. China is ahead, around 6 or 7 years ahead of their commitment on the Paris Summit. So actually, always quoting China is not actually the best argument, in my opinion. But why should the UK speed up in our transition to green, clean energy? The reason why is last year, when the global Ukraine crisis hit, it became very clear that UK was suffering another fossil fuel shock. And what Ed Miliband is doing what every government should do, is protect us from such economic shocks. Consumers last year were hammered with massive bills, paying for the soaring price of fossil fuels. And so therefore, the UK government is rightly saying, to protect Britain, to protect the environment, to protect consumers, we need to invest as fast as possible in a green, clean, cheaper energy grid. And that's what's happening. When you refer to the 40 billion cost, that is not a cost on bill payers, it's not a cost on taxpayers. It's investment by the private sector. £400 billion will be invested by the private sector in the UK economy over the next 5 years. That is a huge positive on economic terms and environmental terms.
All right, Donnachadh, thank you for that point. We'll come back to you. Rupert Darwall, there you go. I mean, Donnachadh's laid it out there. What's not to like?
Well, I think, first of all, he's slightly deluded on the China question, and I suggest that that Mr. McCarthy reads this book by Todd Stern, the Obama climate negotiator, in which he says in 2022 China and President Xi did a U-turn on promising to limit the increase in coal consumption, and China embarked on a massive coal-fired expansion program. On the point about 40 billion a year, it's not a cost to consumers or to taxpayers. That is completely insane and nuts, because capital has to be paid for. Investors aren't charities. They're not just putting in for no return. They're putting in to make profit. And what's happening with the British so-called green grid is we're putting a lot more capital in and we're getting less electricity out. That is essentially the story of the energy transition. You need much more capital to generate less electricity.
We need more capital, but actually no running costs, because actually you're not actually burning coal and burning oil and burning gas every day. Whether you build a nuclear power station, a coal plant, or a gas power plant, or a wind turbine, you have to have capital costs. But the brilliant thing about green energy, once we've invested in the capital costs in the UK, for the next 30 years, we've basically got free electricity. And I will ask the viewers to look and check. The people like Rupert always talk about the cost. But actually, if you check with National Grid Live, you will always see that when there is loads of renewables available, the price goes radically down to around £20-30 a megawatt. When there's actually low renewables available, it soars to £130-140 per megawatt. So what we're saying is that at the moment, the tragedy at the moment is in the United Kingdom, the grid price is cheapest for green energy, but the price for consumer is set by the most expensive energy at that time, and that is fossil fuels or gas, which is the most expensive. We must cut that link. Consumers must benefit from cheap green energy, not being paying the price of expensive fossil fuel electricity.
Rupert.
Yeah, that's another myth coming out from Mr. McCarthy. The point is that there is a growing divergence between the wholesale market and the retail market. Yes, renewables result when there's a lot of wind and a lot of sun. The wholesale price of renewables plummets, can even go negative. That is to say, what they produce, what they generate is not just worthless. You actually have to pay people. It becomes a garbage good. You actually have to pay people to take it away. But the thing is, if renewable investors were paid what the value of what they produce in the wholesale market, there wouldn't be any renewable investment. They would all go bust. In a matter of weeks, they'd go bust.
Well, what's actually interesting is that all of this £40 billion investment doesn't require a cent, Ian, doesn't require a cent of taxpayer subsidy. Rupert was right when he was writing 20 years ago in the various Heritage Foundation reports that actually renewables were expensive 20 years ago. And if you actually to implement global renewables 20 years ago, it'd be expensive. But actually what's happened the last 20 years is that renewables have collapsed in price. They're now around a tenth of the price they were 20 years ago. And so therefore they are really good for Britain, they're good for the economy and for the climate. We mustn't forget that homeowners are the ones who pick up the price for lack of action on climate. Already in the United Kingdom, we've got, through extreme weather, Ian, we've got inflation in food, through extreme weather. Farmers suffered 30% fall, 20% fall in crops this year. Homeowners are paying more in home insurance because of increase in floods. And in those ways, consumers are paying the price for the oil billionaires' profits.
Rupert, I mean, is there anything fundamentally wrong then if Ed Miliband's dream of having the whole country onshore, offshore, wherever, solar panels in hundreds, thousands of acres, and it turns out that that the entire country is mostly fueled by renewables in this kind of way? That would be a good thing, right? I mean, it would be cleaner. We all want cleaner air, and it would ultimately be cheaper. What's wrong with that?
Well, it wouldn't be cheaper. Britain has the most highest electricity prices, retail electricity prices of anywhere in the world. We also have a very high proportion of renewables. Every single extra wind turbine on the grid, every single extra solar farm on the grid makes this country poorer. It is absolutely an insane way to generate
Why does it, just explain that if you could, Rupert, why does it make us poorer?
Because it's a very inefficient a way of generating electricity. It is intermittent. And the fact, Mr. McCarthy says, oh, we're having more extreme weather events, farm yields are going down, house insurance is going up. At the very same time, he says the weather is becoming less predictable, more extreme. He's saying we're going to rely on the weather to generate our electricity. That is completely and utterly insane.
I mean, what if we get a whole summer, Donnachadh, where it doesn't blow very much and, we might enjoy some rays in the sunshine? I know you like nothing better to get on that balcony in the old trunks in the summer. But, of course, the downside, Donnachadh, of that is that if there's no wind, there's no energy.
Well, actually, for example, my house, it's powered by solar at night time. Why was that? Because of a thing called a battery. What we actually need to be doing is three things: investing in renewables, investing in storage, investing in energy efficiency. The three positive things the government needs to be doing. I would ask one question from Rupert. You keep saying that green electricity added to the grid is making us poor. What is the price set by, what sets the UK electricity price? Is it green electricity or is it fossil fuel industry? Because the answer to that is it's fossil fuel electricity setting the price, and that's what's hammering consumers. Answer that question. Is it fossil fuel electricity or is it renewable electricity setting the price for consumers?
Rupert.
That is actually a very good diversion, and I congratulate him on it because wholesale prices do not drive the retail price. There is a massive gap between wholesale prices and retail prices, and it is filled by things like renewable subsidies. So the current generation of renewable projects get these things called contracts for difference, which gives them a guaranteed price, and that is paid by bill payers. So it's highly misleading. It's highly misleading of Mr. McCarthy to go on about the wholesale market. The other point that is consistently ignored is the level of carbon taxes on fossil fuels. So in 2022, which was the peak of the fossil fuel spike, if you look at the carbon costs, that's the ETS and the carbon price support for coal, it was £104 per megawatt hour. For natural gas, it's £41 per megawatt hour. You pull those out, and Mr. McCarthy's calculations go out the window too.
There you go. You've been rumbled, Donnachadh, on basic mathematics.
Yeah, the basic mathematics, he didn't answer the question, which is actually the price of electricity for consumers is set currently, unfortunately, by fossil fuel electricity, which is the most expensive electricity in the market at the moment. However, what I want to return to about actually cost for consumers is that the Global Warming Policy Foundation, which Rupert has written for, has campaigned against almost everything on climate change, including things like making homes, insulating homes. If we could insulate our homes, it makes it cheaper for people to run their houses. Climate regulations for new housing has meant that people occupying new homes have a slashed bill for energy because their homes are climate regulated, insulated. Climate regulations have brought the cost of electric lighting down by nearly 90% because climate regulations have made our lighting more efficient. Climate regulations have reduced the cost of running our cars because cars are more efficient. Everywhere where you look, climate regulations are helping people to reduce their cost of living, and we must keep going. I want everybody to be in a situation like I am in, Ian, where my utility bills for the year are negative because I sell more green electricity to the grid than I buy. I want that for all.
Donnachadh, can we just return though for a second to where we began this, which is why the urgency? I mean, look, I don't know anybody who doesn't want cleaner energy. Of course we do. And if you look at our kind of journey of how we power things, whether it's buildings, whether it's cars or whatever, I mean, it's unrecognisable in this country from what it was 20 years ago. There is if you like, an organic process already underway that was doing, pretty well in terms of innovation, the way we build cars and how we fuel cars, the way we construct buildings, roads, goodness me, the list goes on. We're already on that journey. So why this urgency to 20? What is this sort of man-made figure that isn't shared universally? There are countries around the world that differ wildly on that figure. Why do we have to do this in the next 5.5 years?
Well, I think the urgency really is Ukraine. It really brought home to us the vulnerability of us being dependent on the global fossil fuel market. Anybody who's lived to my lifetime, we've seen around 3 or 4 oil shocks that actually devastate the British economy. And it really is incumbent on our government to protect us against that happening again. And if we can do that in 5 years, we don't know when the next oil shock will come. It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years. And the sooner we protect ourselves so that home consumers are not hammered again like they were last year, I think it's really crucial. And that's really important for protecting our economy. If our economy is being hammered by such inflation shocks every 5-10 years, then we have to protect ourselves from it. That's why.
And Rupert, if this Ed Miliband plan doesn't pan out and we don't hit this 2030 target, and I assume that Donnachadh would like to see that figure at the moment, 6% of energy today produced by renewables, the rest of it pretty much by gas. He'd like to see that reversed. If it doesn't happen, what do you think our country will look like? Will we go dark? Will there be a problem? Will we be at the behest of Vladimir Putin and the likes? His name keeps cropping up on these debates. Yeah. What's the doomsday scenario, do you sense? Or
well, Ian, I think you're fundamentally correct in pointing to the 2030 target, because the faster you go, the more expensive it is. That just happens to be a fact. And the idea that this protects Britain against fossil fuel price volatility, what we're doing is we're exchanging that for much more volatile prices driven by the intermittency of wind and solar. So when Mr. McCarthy said, when he sells his excess electricity to the grid, I guarantee you it'll be at retail prices, not wholesale prices, because sometimes the wholesale price goes negative. To your question, Ian, the outlook for Britain with net zero is very, very grim. It is an anti-growth strategy. If you wanted to do something to really hammer the British economy, you do net zero. And it's not just in Britain that is suffering from net zero. It's the German economy, which is on its back and very sick.
We've been saying that for 20 years, and we've actually cut our carbon by 50%, Rupert. In the years you've been a Cassandra on climate, we have cut our carbon in Britain by 50%, and our economy has grown by 90%. So it's time to lay that.
We've had since 2008, Britain
has had 90%
had
growth in economy, and we've had 50% cut.
All right, briefly, Rupert, on a response to that.
Yeah, and we've had Britain since 2008 has had the lowest growth rate since the lowest per capita productivity increase since the late 18th century.
All
so
right.
You don't want to repeat that. You don't want that to continue.
All right, okay. Gents, we could speak for a lot longer. As ever, thank you to Donnachadh McCarthy, Director of Climate Media Coalition, and also Rupert Darwall. He's the author of Green Tyranny. Which side of the fence did you fall on, having listened to that?